This is the new Canyon NeuronON. And you might say, that's not a new bike. That was introduced like in 2023, I think. But that was only with a carbon frame and the Bosch motor. But you also got the NeuronON Fly, a year or two old bike. And that's got the Bosch CX motor, carbon only. But there also was the old Canyon Neuron AL6, sort of an entry-level bike, only available in the cheapest version with the Shimano motor, with the cheapest spec level. This, though, is the AL9. You can also buy the AL8 and the AL7. And it's a completely different bike compared to all three mentioned Neurons. We got this bike a couple of weeks ago, and we didn't get any info. The bike just showed up. We didn't know what it was, so we looked closer at it. Sure enough, it was a Neuron, an alloy bike, but we didn't know anything about frame geometry, and of course we could see the specs. It's got a Lyric fork. That was quite surprising, because the Neurons always used to have like the Pike forks and lighter forks. And the same can be said about the tires. Why does this bike have the Schwalbe Magic Mary Soft up front? All the other NeuronON bikes, they usually have this tire up front, the hand stamp speed grip with a harder rubber, or knobby nick. And they usually have knobby nick at the rear. So this bike definitely is burlier than the other NeuronON bikes that are available. And sure enough, this bike felt surprisingly stable going downhill, but it could be down to the weight. This is the 800 watt-hours Bosch internal battery and alloy frame, so we threw it on the scales, and with these relatively light pedals, 25.44 kilos. So this bike without pedals, about 25 kilos, which isn't too bad. Alloy frame, Bosch Performance CX Gen 5 motor, big battery. I can live with that. And the rest of the specs, the SRAM DB8. I've ridden that before, like a year or two ago, and that wasn't my favorite brake. But this is the new one, with the mineral oil design. And I quite like it. It's okay. It's a nice brake for this kind of price kit level. The Lyric is fine, of course. It's the Select. The shock, it's the basic RockShox Deluxe Select. Perhaps you would expect a bit more on the top-of-the-line AL9 model, but it's perfectly fine. The Bosch Performance CX BDU 38. That's what Bosch call it. Everyone else calls it Gen 5. 85 newton meters, 600 watts. We climb a lot of stuff. If you get the cadence up a bit, if you go 80, 90, 100 cadence, it's quite rewarding to ride, and you can go up really steep climbs at quite some speed. The drivetrain, that's quite interesting. I think it's the first time I've ridden the new SRAM S1000. So it's a cheaper SRAM transmission wireless drivetrain. Do I miss the GX and X01 or whatever? I don't think so. The battery, it's detachable, and that's quite nice, because not a lot of new bikes are being introduced these days with detachable batteries. So the key goes here and you just drop it out, 800 watt-hours. Also, you can fit the range extender. For our test today, we decided we didn't need the extra weight. I mean, you got 800 watt-hours. So, sure, add the range extender and you're probably at 27 kilos. But as it stands, 25.4 kilos, that's a nice weight. And price is... I just received the prices, and it's 5,499 euros for this AL9 version. And there are two more models being launched today. It's the AL8, which is 500 less, 4,999. And that bike too seems very nicely spec'd. It's got the Fox Rhythm 36 forks, which I quite like. Perhaps I might even like it more than the Lyric, but it's a tad heavier. And also the AL8 gets a new rhythm shock, which I haven't seen before, but yeah, I expect it to be equally as nice. The only thing I sort of don't agree with on the AL8, it's the brake levers, the Shimano M4100. They're quite long, so when doing one finger braking, they can squeeze your outmost fingers. And yeah, I don't like it. But other than that, I think the AL8 looks like one of the better, depending on the price, depending on the discounts, but it looks like a very good option for an entry-level trail-capable EMTB. And it too gets the 800 watt-hours battery. Then's the AL7. It gets the RockShox high-low silver entry fork, basically disqualifying it as a capable trail bike. But for regular, non-aggressive riding, I'm sure it's fine and comfortable. That bike gets the 600 watt-hours battery, but it can be upgraded to the 800 watt-hours. And it's like 3,799 euros, I believe. So 5,499 for the AL9. That's 1,500 less than the carbon version, full power carbon version. And this bike is 2 kilos heavier. The CF9 NeuronON. Yeah, it's got better specs, although it's got a smaller battery. The 750 watt-hours battery has a tad less capacity while being bigger and heavier, and it's non-detachable. So there are some serious advantages to the AL9, I think. Anyway, descending with this bike, even though it's a size medium, felt plenty stable, and it's not like it's heaps heavier than the carbon NeuronON, so there had to be something else about this bike. And when we finally got the press kit, sure enough, chainstay length is up by about 5 millimeters from the other NeuronONs, so 455 millimeters. I think that is slightly long, but sure, I can understand it for this kind of bike. I mean, it's supposed to be a cheaper bike with less travel and not too lightweight. So it makes sense having a longer wheelbase, making the bike more confidence-inspiring, easier to ride in the steep sections, in the steep climbs. And the head angle, 64.5 degrees. Isn't that like a degree slacker than the previous Neurons? At least the Neuron Carbon, full power version? I think so. How about suspension then? 143 millimeters, I think, at the back, 150 at the front. So a slight increase in suspension travel. This is a burlier, more capable bike than all the other NeuronON versions. And it feels that way riding the bike. Going down steep descents, trying to muscle up the front end to avoid an obstacle or just do a small drop, and you feel the long rear end and the bike weight. It's heavy, so it's not the most nimble bike, but it's nice and stable and reasonably playful on the descents. So it feels like a more capable, more all-round perhaps bike than the other NeuronON versions. So the new Canyon NeuronON AL. It's a slightly more confidence-inspiring bike than the other Neuron models. It's perhaps a bit more all-round. It makes this bike a very interesting option to get slightly improved downhill performance at a much lower price. I had quite a bit of fun riding this bike, and it proved to be a much more interesting bike than I thought when I received it, mainly because the changes they did with a slacker geometry, longer travel, burlier kit. That's it. Appreciate any likes and subscribes. Thanks for watching.